Hello, I'm joined today by Bill Bailey. Bill, welcome.
Hi, Adam.
Well, first things first, congratulations are in order. We're filming this the week after your big win in the Swiss in St. Louis. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Funny story there. Our team, my life partner slash wife, won her first national title a year ago in Memphis. And I had not had one. And coincidentally, that title also gave her enough master points to take her just over 10,000. So by winning that one event, she became a Grand Life Master. And I've been hearing about this all year about how Bill's jealous. He's never going to get it. He may get to 10,000 master points. I think I have 7 now, but the national title is the elusive one. So I got the national title just now, and in St. Louis on the same day, she won her second national title in the women's event. So now this whole coming year, I'm going to be hearing about, well, how many do you have? Because I have 2. Oh, you've only got 1. Okay.
Well, we'll get back to this event, but I want to start with how did you learn bridge?
Yeah, I have kind of a unusual backstory there. Growing up, my family and friends, nobody played cards. I think maybe I played War or Go Fish once or twice, but no exposure to cards or games, a little bit of chess. And then I got to college, and I think it was junior year, some guys down the hall in the dormitory were playing hearts. And so I was intrigued. I sat down and they taught me the game, discovered I really enjoyed it, enjoyed playing it, shooting the moon, all that. There was talk in the heart groups that, there was this game called Bridge, which is supposed to be like the chess of card games, sort of like hearts, and that you got to follow suit and the high card wins the trick, but it's like really hard, but nobody knew how to play bridge. Well, one day I was in the bookstore looking for a book on chess, and I saw right next to it, Intro to Bridge, learn how to play bridge. And I'm, oh, that's the game that guys have been talking about. So I grabbed that book and I read it, and, it was just intro. So it was like, draw trump, set up long suits, cross roughs. And I read the whole thing and I'm like, seems easy to me. And about a month later, I discovered the bridge column in the newspaper. I read the bridge column. It was 4 spades. I'm looking at all 4 hands and I couldn't figure out how to make it. And then I read the solution and it was like garden variety end play. Right. And I was jumping up and down at how brilliant I thought that was, because of course the intro book didn't discuss end plays. So I went immediately back to the bookstore the next day and I bought my second bridge book, which was by Frank Stewart, Better Bridge for the Advancing Player. And this is a kind of book where each hand is accompanied with an anecdote. And so it was an entertaining read. And the very first deal featured a show-up squeeze. And when I read the solution, I was jumping up and down like, oh my God, that's so brilliant. And so this started a 30-year career for me reading, never playing bridge, reading bridge books on the side. I think my 3rd book was Bridge with the Blue Team. And my 4th book was Adventures in Card Play by Kelsey. So I got into the weeds really quickly.
Yeah, you dived into the deep end.
Yeah. And, so I was fascinated by the game. And for 30 years, it was like a hobby. And it was mostly just declare, play problems, try to do something clever to make this contract. But I worked in Silicon Valley as a software engineer, very intense environment. 60-hour weeks were normal. 80 to 100-hour weeks were not uncommon, like when I did startups. And so there was really no time to actually sit down and play bridge. Well, as I was reading these bridge books, I would occasionally come across a bridge hand work that I couldn't solve, where I thought to myself, I'm a software engineer. I bet I could write a program that could solve this. One of them was a famous bridge hand. You have 5 trump in hand, 4 in dummy, and you have queen solid 6 of clubs in dummy, but you have the ace king tight in your hand, and the club suit is blocked. And it turns out the way to make this deal is you have to rough down into your hand 3 times, reducing you to 2 trump. Then you draw all 4 trump in dummy, jettisoning the ace king so that the club suit will run. It completely escaped me. And I thought I could write a program to solve this. The other one, another brilliant hand, you're 5, 2, 3, 3 in both dummy and hand, completely mirrored distribution. You're in 6 spades. You have all the big spades, but you have the 2 and the 3. Well, you're completely mirrored. You have no spots and you have only 11 tricks. It's like, this is impossible. How could you possibly make 12 tricks on this hand? And the trick is you take the ace of trump, the king of trump, they break 3-0, carefully preserving the 2 and the 3. You play some cards and some other suits to create an end play situation against the opponent with 3 trumps. Then you play the 2 of spades to the 3 of spades, forcing lefty to win the 4. He's immediately end played into giving you back the trick that you just forfeited. And the end play, the rough slough end play, creates an imbalance in the position such that you can now squeeze the other opponent in the minors. So I read that and I'm like, oh, this is brilliant. And again, I'm like, I bet I could write a program to solve this. So after 12 years at Oracle, database company, where I kind of I was doing software engineer, I took a year and a half off and I wrote Deep Finesse. And never having played bridge, just reading these bridge books and stuff. And the trick with that is, anybody that's taken computer science 101 knows how to write a tree algorithm that can explore a game tree and bubble up the best line. The trick though is to make it quick, because a brute force search of a bridge hand is, it's like 48 to the third power is the size of the number of branches you have to search. And it would take the world's fastest supercomputer 3 universe lifetimes to explore every line. So the trick is to come up with clever ways to make it fast. So I did all this research, and after about a year and a half, I was ready to come out with Deep Finesse, and I decided to promote. And the vision that I had was, it's commonplace now, but nobody had done it back then. You have all 4 hands, and each card gets labeled with, this is a green, yellow, green, good, yellow, caution, one trick worse, red, bad, and it would label each card so you could interactively explore a deal. So, if it said you could make 3-no trump and you're looking at it and you're like, I can't possibly see how to do this, you could plug it in and you could explore. And then I also found it very interesting to explore lines that I thought would work, but for some reason didn't, because there was some clever defensive play that I missed. So I packaged this up and I went to the 1999 Summer NABC, which was in San Antonio. And I set up a booth and, I'm promoting my new Deep Finesse bridge software and I'm demoing it to people. I remember wandering into the big convention center playing area and being like in awe, because I had never been in a room like that before, and just, huge room, tables and people as far as the eye can see. And it's dead silent because everyone is playing bridge.
This is the first tournament you've ever gone to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had never really played bridge at all. I think I had tried to play casually with some friends on the side, but never formal bridge. And for the first time in my life, I saw a physical hand record. And I looked at the hand record and, a light bulb went off. I had envisioned Deep Finesse as interactive graphics, explore the bridge hand, but I'm like, I could recraft it to work with the software that generates the bridge hand to include double dummy records at the bottom. And so, this is all commonplace now, but 20 years ago, there were no double dummy results on hand records. Maybe it's 25 now. So I fired up Microsoft Word and I mocked up a fake bridge hand and I included double dummy results. And I went around to all the main directors and all the key people at the ACBL and said, hey, Bill Bailey, I got this Deep Finesse software booth outside. Check out, I got this idea. I could put double dummy results on the hand record. And they all completely lambasted it. This isn't real bridge. Bridge players don't want to see double dummy results. No, go away. Leave us alone. So I started selling Deep Finesse back at the time. This is late 90s, as I said. You were still buying software on DVDs and you had to drop the DVD in the ROM drive and install it. So I created graphics and I cut all these DVDs and started selling them. But late in this cycle, this was late 90s. So it was the first .com boom, when everybody was in tech was creating .coms, furniture.com, like 90% of them went belly up. But some friends approached me and said, we're thinking about doing online accounting software. QuickBooks on the internet was sort of the early tagline. And I'm like, I don't like accounting and that's boring, but I bet that's a winner as a product. So like no sooner was I done building Deep Finesse that I co-founded this .com, netledger.com, doing online accounting software. And that was, any software engineer will tell you, when there's 4 of you at a .com startup, you're underfunded. It's like everybody's got to be a jack of all trades. That was like the 80 to 100 hour work weeks, no time for anything to do with Deep Finesse. And a couple years in, maybe 2001, my phone rings. Is this William Bailey? Yes. Are you the guy that wrote Deep Finesse? Yes. Well, this is so-and-so from the ACBL. I'm here with all the key people from the ACBL. Have we got an idea for you? would you be willing to license your software to us so that we could put double dummy results on hand records? I went, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? So I licensed to them, and they used to start producing hand records. I also worked with Fred Gittleman at the time. He was still the man at BBO. I gave him an API and he incorporated it into BBO so that you could have the first play through a bridge hand that you just did on BBO with the cards marked and see the right place to make. And still, I hadn't played any bridge. Well, the .com, my idea when I said yes to do the .com was, in 4 years, maybe 5 tops. So, we're going to hit it big. We'll go public. I'll be financially independent. Then I could start playing bridge. And that did eventually happen, except instead of 4 years, it took like 17 years. So in my early 50s, 52-ish, I'm 60 now, I walked away. 30 plus years in high tech was enough, built up enough money where I like to say I'm short of obscenely wealthy, but financially independent. And so I dove into bridge, and it's kind of funny how that happened too, because I looked around and discovered there was a Palo Alto bridge club. Oh, I live in Palo Alto. So I wandered in there one day and, unfamiliar environment, don't know anybody. I walked up to somebody who looked like they were in charge. I think it was Lori Spaeth was the director that night. And I said it sheepishly. I'm like, oh, my name's Bill Bailey. I've never played bridge, but I've read a bunch of bridge books. I did the deep finesse, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. There's a guy from Texas over there looking for a partner. The game starts in 10 minutes. Go sit at C1. So I wandered over to table C1. And wouldn't you know it, the very first deal I ever played in like a formal setting at a club was a grand slam that required a non-simultaneous double squeeze to bring home. And I'm declaring it. And I brought it home, not because I brilliantly executed the non-simultaneous double squeeze, but lefty prematurely unguarded dummies, side suit. So I was able to claim it like trick 7.
Well, you went back after the game and put it into deep finesse to see how you could actually make it?
I immediately got home and put it into deep finesse and went through the whole non-simultaneous squeeze part of it. And so at that point, I started playing with some of the local club players, Hansa, Nary, Shima, and Mukund Thapa. And then I started working originally with Debbie Rosenberg as like a coach, mentor. And I played with her for a couple of years, started going to tournaments. This is a funny story. So my very first official, like big tournament, not at the club, was the 2015 Summer Nationals in Chicago. And I'd been playing some with Hansa at the club, and somebody on her team dropped out. And I have like 17 master points at this point. And she says, Bill, I want you to join my spin goal team. And I'm like, okay. And so I wander into the big spin goal on her team four-handed. And I sit down against 2 guys I don't know by the name of Curtis Cheek and Ish Del Monte or something like that, who are 2 world-class players. I didn't know it at the time. And of course, they're playing some complicated precision system. I barely know how to bid 2 over 1. I don't know anything about precision. So in the first session, and I'm a deer in headlights, I'm just nervous as all get out. And I look at all this precision. I mean, they use every bid in the bidding box, and I have no idea what's going on. But I look and I see that I'm on lead against 7 clubs and I've got 2 red aces, so I double. Curtis thinks and he pulls to 7 spades. And it comes back around to me and I look and I realize, I'm still on lead in 7 spades. I still have my 2 red aces, so I double. So then it goes back to, actually it was Curtis that pulled it to 7 no trump. Thinks and he pulls it to 7 no trump. And I look at the cards and I realize I'm on lead against 7 no trump with 2 red aces. So I double. Curtis, I put down one of my red aces. Curtis puts down the dummy. It turns out 7 clubs and 7 spades were both making because they had opposite voids in the red suits. And 7 no trump was down, and Ish picked up his cards, threw them at Curtis and screamed. And this is my introduction to high-level competitive bridge. And
you came back.
Yeah, I came back after that. Well, that was kind of a dark comedy, satisfying moment, taking 2 of the best players in the world down 2 doubled and 7 no trump and watching them freak out at each other, especially because 7 clubs and 7 spades were both making the whole time.
I bet they still won the match, though, didn't they?
They did. They didn't have too much trouble beating Hansa and me four-handed.
All right. I'm just flabbergasted here that You go 30 years reading all these bridge books, never playing a card.
It reminds me a little of golf. I think my father-in-law tried to get me into golf at one point. A round of golf is 4 hours, just like a round of bridge is about 4 hours. You kind of want to get there beforehand, tune up, and then you sort of in golf, you go to the golf house afterwards and talk about the round. And it's just very time consuming. I'm like, I could never get into golf with my father-in-law because I'm like, I don't have 5 or 6 hours with any kind of regularity to play. I also, like when I was doing that second startup, I wrote Deep Finesse when my kids were 3 and 1-ish. And, and then I'm working 80 hours a week at the startup, and all my non-work time was spent being a dad to this toddler and infant. And so the idea that I would have, I'll carve out 5 hours and go play bridge regularly was not in the cards, as they say.
Do you think if there were like a 90-minute or a 2-hour game that you could have played in, that you might have been able to make that work?
I just never really looked into it. I was happy, I had maybe this is a bit ribald, but I imagine a lot of bridge players do this. There was always a bridge book in my bathroom, if you know what I mean. So I would always once or maybe twice a day get a chance to read a bridge hand. And that was my extent with bridge until I started playing in my early 50s.
Yeah,
And
I've had a stack of Bridge World magazines in my bathroom for, 20
yeah.
years.
Yeah. I was reading Jeff Rubins of Bridge World, and there was a famous deal from Eli Culbertson played in the tweets that had been around as like one of the jewels. It was presented as a would you rather declare or defend problem. And you look at it and you're like, okay, I want to declare. Well, what if the defense does this? Yeah. And then I'm going down. Oh, but wait a minute. If the defense does that, I can counter with this clever move. Oh, but if you counter with that clever move, the defense can do this to counter your counter. And it was presented as in the end, the defense will prevail. And I sort of looked at it and I wasn't convinced by the analysis. So I plugged it into Deep Finesse, and sure enough, there was a way to make it. And I remember I described it to Jeff as like, it was a repeating loser on loser play. You had to make like back-to-back loser on loser plays to bring this thing home. And so Jeff was like, oh my God, this hand's been in the literature as a famous hand for 60 years. And everybody thought it was the defense wins. So that was a big win. And also at the time, and again, this is, even though I started playing with Debbie when I retired, this was 16 years prior. This was in 1999. Michael Rosenberg, and of course, I'd never met any of these people, had written his book, Bridge, Z and Me. Yeah. And he's got 10 of my all-time favorite hands in there. And one of them, again, I read his answer and I was like, I'm not convinced. Plugged it into Deep Finesse. There was an error in his analysis. And somehow I figured out how to get his email. And I sent him an email saying, I think you got hand number 3 wrong. And he wrote me back. And the first word was, congratulations. You and your software had spotted something that a sea of world-class editors missed. So that was another big satisfying win.
Yeah, I mean, bridge experts, you have to have some humility in this game. And there are things a computer can do that we can't. So I'm not surprised to hear Michael Rosenberg say, wow, you got me, right?
Well, and that's the next thing. So I came out with Deep Finesse and I started selling it. Apparently it had law of unintended consequences, right? All of these columnists, bridge hand columnists, they started getting people running into them. Your analysis is wrong in this hand. You missed blah, 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 blah. And really, they were using Deep Finesse behind the scenes to figure this stuff out. And so then all the bridge columnists had to start using Deep Finesse. And in fact, Mukund Thapa, who was like one of my early mentors back in Palo Alto when I was just starting, gave me a book. It was a kind of a gag. He gave me a book by David Byrd, Clever Plays in the Trump Suit. Mukund just gave it to me casually. And a couple days later, I'm in the bathroom. And I opened up the book, and right there on the second page, I had never met David Byrd, never conversed with him. And the book was dedicated to me, saying, without William Bailey's amazing Deep Finesse software, this book could never have been written. So that's
gotta feel good.
Yeah. And Mukund is a nice little gag on his part, because I think he knew that it was dedicated to me, but he didn't. He just handed it to me like, Bill, now that I've been playing with you a little while, I think you would really benefit from some of the lessons in this book, Clever Plays in the Trump Suit. So that was a pleasant surprise.
So in your 30 years of reading bridge before you really started playing, what are some of the books that stand out as some of the best, some of the most educational, the most entertaining?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember Dan saying he got super into the whole character thing in the Victor Molo, and maybe you're influenced a lot by the early books that you read. Because that second book I read was by Frank Stewart, Better Bridge for the Advancing Player, where each bridge hand was accompanied with some amusing anecdote. Like, I arrived at my mother-in-law's house to deliver the groceries, and they had a bridge game going, but somebody called in sick, and so they asked me to fill in, and then tales about little old ladies. And I really enjoyed that book. I loved Bridge with the Blue Team. Kelsey's books were all just mind-bendingly complicated. But probably, like, if a magic genie could have tracked like the amount of time I spent reading different authors, probably the number one guy I've spent the most hours reading would be Frank Stewart, just because he's the one that kind of made me fall in love with Bridge with that second Bridge book.
So it sounds like it's been 10 years ish since you started getting into bridge again,
Yeah.
or for the first time, really.
I really think it was fall of 2016 when I started like actually going to tournaments and really diving in. And the reason I mean, it's because that's when my youngest went off to college, and that kind of freed me up to do traveling tournaments and stuff. And since then, it's been this gradual uptick. So, what happened is my life partner / wife, RT Barga, and I used to go to bridge tournaments, and she would hire a pro and I would hire a pro, and the four of us would make a team. And, she's a, she's a Grand Live master, very competent player, but, she's not like a tippy top expert, nor am I. And so we would do well, but not great. And then we started playing some of the big events. And then I decided, like, to really have a chance at these big events, I'm going to have to hire a team. And at first I was like, well, I'm just going to go four-handed, right? Why would I pay more money to play less bridge on a six-handed team? So we did that for a while. And I think, playing four-handed in New Orleans 3-ish years ago, we did it surprisingly well in the big event. I think it was the Vanderbilt. We won our first two matches four-handed. And then we were up like 17 imps after 3/4 with 15 boards to go against Fleischer. And then I learned why people do six-handed teams. I was tired and I made a couple of critical errors, and they ended up beating us. And so from that point forward, I'm like, well, okay, if I want to win, I got to go six-handed. And so now I field a very strong team: Dan Corbell, Josh Don, Jor Pradhan, Alone Berman. And after, last summer in San Francisco, we were up at the halftime in, I think it was the quarters. So we almost made the semis, but then didn't quite make it to the semis. Or do I have that wrong? It might've been we were in the semis and almost made it to the final. Hopes were high, but it fell down. And then we got to the Vanderbilt this year, and for whatever reason, the bridge gods were not on our side. We had an absolutely atrocious tournament until the Swiss at the end. So, yeah.
Tell us about those 2 days, right? Got to be some of the best 2 days of your bridge life.
Yeah. I mean, we were up at the half. I think Josh and Dan would tell you, I'm pretty hard on myself. Even though we were up after day one, I was obsessing about this mistake or this bidding error. During COVID, I discovered Gavin Wolpert's expert bidding series where he does online videos, and digested all of that, watched all those videos multiple times. And that really got my bidding up to sort of like expert standard kind of level. And I kind of condensed everything he had done. And of course, Josh and Dan and I have tweaked it and put our own little flavor on it. But I'm kind of very happy with my bidding notes. I got tired of printing out reams and reams of paper. So I designed it as a Google Doc that renders very well on a phone. And so we always have the notes with us. And what'll happen at the table is if we have a complicated auction where we're not quite sure what this bid is supposed to mean, then who's ever dummy will whip out their phone and find it. And it's like, yeah, it's right here. See, or if it's wrong, you can just update it and fix it while you're right there at the table. So I'm very happy with how the notes have come, and all that. I got that whole process started of like converting his master bidding series to this online Google Doc that we always have with us during COVID. And so I think my bidding actually got a whole lot more expert during COVID. And then, yeah, I think I have gotten pretty good, generally speaking, at judgment when it comes to slam, when to go for slam, when not to. And, Josh and Dan have been invaluable in that, learning to play the cover card game. But for some reason, it fell down on me in St. Louis. I bid too much here, didn't bid enough there. And so I was feeling shell shocked by all that. But then all's well that ends well. Yeah, we were up the half. And then, of course, what I discovered that next day, I mean, this is, I guess, obvious, but it didn't really hit me until I experienced it. But when you're leading the field after day one, you're always playing whoever's in second place. So you're always playing a really good team, which means it's really hard to maintain your first place status. And I think we dropped down to 9th or 10th in the middle of the day. And then my guys came roaring back at the end to win. So, yeah, that
Do you like to play the first half? What quarters do you like to play?
Yeah, I generally a morning person. So I kind of want to get my set out of the way in the morning. And then, I try to be good. One thing I'll often do is I'll take my laptop down to the gym, like for example, at the trials where everything's online. And I'll go and I'll ride the Stairmaster or the bike with the laptop in front of me, and I'm watching everything happen online while I'm getting some exercise.
Nervous do you get watching your team in, the end of big matches?
It is interesting because one time I remember I'm watching, and this was last year's trials. I had Kevin Rosenberg and Brian Platnick on the team. And Kevin, I'm watching him in a hand where he has to do a dummy reversal followed by a squeeze, and he executed it perfectly. I was like, yes, this is going to be a big swing. And then it comes, and 10 minutes later, Jeff Mextroff plays the same deal. And he pulled off the same dummy reversal squeeze that Kevin pulled off 10 minutes earlier. And I was, oh, shucks. And so I don't know that I get too nervous watching the other guys play. I definitely, like, one thing I do or I try to do, and we made this mistake in St. Louis, I like to get there a day before I start playing, kind of get settled in the day before, go to the gym, go to the grocery store, get all unpacked and dialed in, get a good night of sleep, go into the first big event. So if you're playing the first big event on Friday, I like to fly Wednesday, settle in on Thursday. And for a variety of reasons, this time we went in on Thursday, and then the flight got delayed and we got in late. We didn't like the hotel room, and I couldn't unpack, and I had to go play the Platinum Pairs the next morning without any warm-up time or anything. And so, I was definitely feeling nervous for that.
Once you're at the tournament, what does your routine look like?
I try to be really good about getting some exercise. I love to get up in the morning and go put in some time at the gym. It puts me in a good mental space for, feeling like I'm on top of my game here and working out and playing bridge. And, obviously making sure you get enough sleep.
What does your workout routine look like?
It's split. Sometimes on any given day, I either hit the bike or the treadmill pretty hard, or I do weights, and I kind of toggle back and forth.
So you're going to the gym every morning at the Nationals?
Like Phoenix, I remember I was super disciplined. I went every single morning. Some of the regionals, like we just played the Scottsdale regional back in August, I guess, and they had this awesome gym at the top of the facility with, views all around the valley. And I got up there every morning before the round. I can't say I'm always that disciplined. I think in St. Louis here, I made it to the gym 4, maybe 5 times, not every day.
Well, that's 4 or 5 times more than I did. So good for you. How much do you treat these tournaments as a learning opportunity, and how much is just pure competition?
Always learning. I mean, I can't play a round of bridge with the caliber of player like Dan and Josh without learning multiple things. So everything's a learning experience, but it's also a competition. I'm definitely playing to win. I wouldn't have gone to 6-handed otherwise. But I mean, every round of bridge. I mean, have you ever played a round of bridge where you felt like you didn't learn something new?
No, absolutely not. But do you want Josh and Dan to point things out at the table, or what's your routine there with them?
Yeah, and I did this with all pros. I mean, I think we understand each other's rhythms. I definitely like to hear stuff in the moment, especially if it's not super complicated. Like, Bill, you could have made if you just, or occasionally, like, Bill, you had a brain malfunction. You just needed to lead spades up twice. And 95% of the time when they point something out to me, I think for half a second, I go, my God, of course. I see what you're saying exactly. Every once in a while, there's a more complicated hand like Bill. I think you might have missed a complicated squeeze. And then I'll say, okay, let's go over that at lunch. But most of the feedback, I like the feedback in the moment when the hand you just played is right in your head. And, the only thing is, and they're both gentlemen, present the mistake as in a pleasant edge, don't crack on me for being an idiot, right? That's not going to go over well. And they're not like that. I've played with some other partners who start screaming at you when they think you've made a mistake.
Yeah, no, you've picked some good ones for sure.
Yeah.
When you have that moment though, when they're like, you just needed to lead spades up twice, and you're like, oh my God. How do you get over that?
Yeah, I think is it Alfred Scheinwald, maybe in one of his books, he talks about the importance of letting the mistake go and focusing on the next hand. I could be better about that, but I think there's definitely been more than one or two times when I missed an obvious negative double on the next deal because my head was spinning from the last one or something like this. And I don't think it's a big problem though, because what happens is you get into the next hand and maybe your head is spinning about the previous hand when you're thinking. But then if I'm declaring this hand, I get engrossed in that hand and solving that problem. And then it just kind of flushes the previous mistake.
Tell me about the decision early on to play with pros. Where did that originate for you? Who suggested that? What was your initial reaction to it?
It is funny because at the very beginning, before I knew anything about the market and how it all worked, I knew there were people who you could pay to play bridge with you. And my very early 10 master point me was like, only like really terrible bridge players have to pay people to come play with them because they can't find any good bridge players that are willing to play with them because they're terrible. So there's no way I would do that. And then somebody early on kind of disabused me of that notion and said, no. Think about it like it's a coach. It's just a pro coach. Even Tiger Woods has a swing coach, right? Even Michael Phelps has a swim coach. Think of it as like somebody who's tippy top expert and they're your coach. And so once I kind of adapted to that mindset, I didn't have any problem with it.
Yeah, and then you were lucky, it sounds like, that you were in the Bay Area and Debbie was one of your first
Yeah, she
people.
was the best. She's a world-class player and a world-class educator. And I discovered that she has a way of, I was on her wavelength, when she would try to explain a complicated position, I would understand the language she would use. And so she was really helpful in the beginning, in terms of education and way to think. One of the challenges I found that I ran into is it's not that easy to transition from being a high volume reader of bridge books to sitting at a table, because obviously when you're reading bridge books, you don't have to track cards, right? Most of the problems are like you figure out the clever plan that before you play to trick one to make this deal, as opposed to, it's less common in books where you evolve your plan based on cards that are getting played. And I found it I remember in the beginning, I found it very unnatural I had to force myself to remember to like look at the two cards that were played and say them out loud in my mind. Right. And, like it wasn't, it happened more than a few times where I'm looking at the dummy comes down. Okay, I'm 5-2 in this side suit, right? So I'd need to track that suit if it goes 3-3. And then I'm drawing trump. And then I'm like, I forgot to look at the cards they were discarding. I can't remember if they discarded the 5-2 suit. So now I don't know if it's breaking 3-3 or not. So that was like an early struggle, just forcing myself to look at the cards. And sometimes I'm even still not great at it. Like if I think I've got this hand dialed in, I'll play it too fast and I'll forget to look. Yeah, so I transitioned from her. And then I think I played briefly with Sylvia Shee. I sort of went down this rabbit hole with her for a little while. We hired her, I think it was San Diego 2018, to join a four-handed team with us. And she was doing this transfer-oriented symmetric relay version of Strong Club. And algorithmically, as like a math computer science guy that's loved math puzzles his whole life, I found that interesting. And so I went down that rabbit hole with her for a little while. And I met Dan through her. And then I started playing with Dan and Josh. And those two guys have been kind of staples on my teams. We're great friends in addition to being bridge partners.
So what do you do these days to improve your game? When you're not at a tournament, what does your bridge life look like?
Yeah, I tend to get obsessed with an area and then dial down on it. Like when during COVID, when I discovered the Gavin site, I was just obsessed with bidding and digesting everything on his site and rearranging and reformatting it into my online doc, constantly working on the notes, constantly deciding to reformat and reshape. And, the whole trick is to have them be complete, but be as pithy and as accessible as possible. And so I became kind of a mad scientist with that. For a long time, oh, you mentioned favorite bridge books. Well, I just remembered there's one called The Art of Declare Play by Bork. And like every hand in there is incredibly rich. And so I would spend a lot of time doing that. One thing that we've been doing lately that I've found very valuable is on the off weeks when we're not at tournaments, we'll do 2 hours online a day with people like, she plays with her partner, Disa Iceland. I call her Disa Iceland because I can never remember how her last name is pronounced.
Isa's enough. We know
Yeah.
who you're talking about.
And Dan or Josh or Aaron Jones, we play with a lot. And we will do 2 hours of just, partner up and play from 10 to noon every day, just to stay sharp, keep the rust off. I still love reading bridge books and bridge hands and thinking about bridge problems that way. That's kind of how we do it.
And how would you say you are better now than you were, let's say, 5 years ago? I know you said you went through Gavin stuff and, that really helped your bidding. Are there other ways that, working with Josh and Dan and all these other folks, like where do you see it that you're better than you were the 5 years ago, Bill?
I'm definitely better than 5 years ago. I think a lot of it is the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, putting time at the table, tracking the cards. Dan has worked with me a lot on squeeze play and defensive play and how to track stuff, and ditto Josh. So, I just have excellent coaching. And then, I'll miss something at the table and they point it out, and then that kind of slowly sticks in the head. And, and then on bidding things, like the thing that I say to them is this is the way you're adding something new or something tricky. Okay, I got to think about it. We got to talk about it. I got to write it up. I got to get it in the notes. And then I have to fuck it up once or twice at the table. And then it sticks for good. Right. So getting through those kind of mistakes. And just, the more you play, the better you get. I will mention, I think Max Shearson, who's lived in Palo Alto with me, came up with this analogy that I thought was very apt, which is that if you move to a different country and are exposed to a completely new language pre-puberty, you can actually get to the point where you speak fluently, and they can't tell that it's your second language if it happens before puberty. But if it happens shortly after puberty, your brain changes a lot in puberty. You might master the language, but people will always be able to kind of tell that, your speech is a little funny, your accent's a little funny. You don't quite sound like you're a native speaker. And the challenge, Max said this about himself, and I think it applies to me. I didn't touch a card and play a card at a table until I was in my 50s. And when you're 50, and it's weird, right? Because I had a lot of exposure to fancy bridge plays and tricks from reading bridge books. But I didn't have any, tracking cards at the table until I was in my 50s. And, I feel it. You don't learn new stuff as quickly when you're older. I mean, I remember being in college, I'm 20 years old. My brain was just a sponge. I just took it all in quickly and learned it quickly, and it stuck quickly. And now it just takes a little more, like I said, you have to screw it up once or twice before it really sticks.
Well, that's a great place for us to end. Screw it up once or twice before it sticks. That should be the motto of this podcast. Well, thank you, Bill. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for writing Deep Finesse. Every bridge player has benefited from that. So thank you. And again, congratulations. I was so glad to see you guys win.
Okay, I enjoyed it. This is really, really fun, Adam. Thanks a lot.